the bullets or targets in this deck that these players are playing, a copy of Hornet Queen, a Nylea, God of the Hunt, a Pharika, God of Affliction, and a main deck Nylea's Disciple. So not too fancy besides that. All the stuff you're used to. Elvis Mystic, Sylvan Caryatid, Voyaging Satyr, Burning Tree Emissary, the density of mana acceleration and devotion that you need. Courser Krufix, Palicronos, and Eidolon of Blossoms.
Yeah, well, we are underway right now. Both players starting out with kind of that mana ramp that you expect out of this deck. An Elvish Mystic out of Tenjum, Burning Tree into Caryatid from Ketter.
And Court of Calling, one of the more powerful cards in Modern. And Standard definitely has the base, not quite to make the same kind of power level decks, but the same density of cheap mana creatures and huge powerful creatures one needs to facilitate that kind of deck.
Well, I'll tell you what excites me about it. A lot of times when I looked at these green decks, these green devotion decks, I saw a card like Burning Tree Emissary and said, man, that guy's kind of a loser in this deck. I get that you need green mana symbols for you know, your Nykthos activations, but this 2/2 doesn't do much for the deck. But Court of Calling gives him a second function, I think. I'm interested to see what, you know, how fast Kent can ramp with a hand like this.
It's another card that can both kind of piece together the early turns for you and find a game winner once you're all set up. The deck in the market for both of those effects.
All right, well, Kent with the first non-mana creature, that's going to be Eidolon of Blossoms. It draws him to a copy of Palukranos World Eater, and then we'll pass back to Tenjum. And Palukranos, to me at least, seems like a card that if you can stick that down early and get a lot of mana behind it, it can really make this a one-sided game.
It's another card, you know, some mixture of normalization and payout. It can be a cheap, you know, very early 5/5, which is quite good. And it is another thing you can go off with your Nykthos draws. So much like Eidolon of Blossoms, a card that can play both roles, both sort of a normal stabilizing card and something that you can go crazy with.
Yeah, looking at Kent's hand, it looks like he has a pair of Court of Callings, another Voyaging Satyr, along with a Garruk Caller of Beasts. No more lands this turn. I'm pretty excited about how this mirror plays, because a lot of times the matchup when you're playing this Green Devotion deck is the Green Devotion deck is trying to ramp out big things, and the other guy's, you know, trying to keep them down, you know, kill their mana creatures, deal with the threats. But this one, it's like both players are just, you know, they're like hitting home runs and seeing who can hit one farther.
Yeah.
All right, we see a Court of Calling for Ketter. It's going to be for X = 3. And it looks like he needs to find more action, and he's going to go ahead and get Course of Krufix. I'm looking for more lands, I would think.
Yeah, his hand is right now just, it is all spells, and some of them are quite expensive. You see Palicronos in his hand, Garruk, so he's in the market for more mana. He also gets to draw a card off the Eidolon in this world too, so you see him shuffling back the Pharika as well. Both of these cards will trigger the Eidolon, so Ken just deciding which one of these effects he wants to go get.
All right, so yeah, Courser's into play there. He gets the trigger off the Eidolon, as you said. Doesn't have his land yet for the turn, but he gets 2 cards, you know, the one he draws and then the one that remains on top of his deck here to try to hit.
And this matchup feels like a race to Nykthos to me, because both of these decks, obviously, they're all playing the same tools. It's the same 75, so it's who's going to be able to break serve first or really explode the pace of play. And it's the player who finds Nykthos who's going to be likely to do that.
And as you say that, Kent draws a card, and the top card is the Nykthos you mentioned. And I have to agree, like I was, you know, if you want to go back to the analogy of both players are trying to hit a home run and see who can hit farther, Nykthos is so much resource. It seems like the most powerful thing you can do with the deck. You see, counting Kent's mana symbols here, he's on 7 green right now. So Nykthos is already tapping for +4 mana than what it normally would.
And this is what I was mentioning before about Palicronos kind of being able to play both roles of normal card that can be just good in a normal game of Magic and something that you can go off with.
Well, so we can go off. We'll see what Tenjum can do here. He makes a second Eidolon of Blossoms, draws a couple cards, plays Burning Tree into Voyaging Satyr, but that does untap, and you will see what kind of destruction Kent can do with this Palukranos. It's possible that he could monsters this and eat a lot of Tenjum's board. I don't have the exact count on how much we're talking about, but it's not a little.
He also has the option of playing Garruk this turn, drawing some cards, building up his board, and then doing that play the following turn.
Right. We'll see what he does here. So Nykthos, we said, he taps for 7. He has 8 mana available, 9 once you count the Sylvan Caryatid.
It's not clear to me that Kent can make any appreciable inroads to Tenjum's board this turn. He may be able to kill some mana creatures, but it's one of those things where if Tenjum doesn't have Nykthos, then you can clear everything up next turn. And if he does have Nykthos, you're probably not doing enough damage to his board to prevent him from doing anything of significance. So Kent may want to go with Garruk as his big play this turn to pave the road for Palakranos next turn.
Yeah, he's going to do that. And, I think I agree. He probably wants to get this Voyaging Satyr down as well. Right now, that guy represents so much mana because of the Nykthos that's in play. We'll see Garrett gets plussed. It's going to go ahead and draw copies of, we see Hornet Queen, Courser of Kruphix, Sylvan Caryatid, Courser of Kruphix, drawing 4. So all the tools that Kent could need here. I doubt he's even going to have time to play all of those.
No. Although, next turn, if he does deploy this Voyaging Satyr, as you mentioned, he could make, 30, 40 mana is not out of the question. If you've never seen Green Devotion in action before, this deck can generate a lot of mana once it gets to this sort of board.
Yeah, the key card, remember, Voyaging Satyr can untap Nykthos, so that's a second Nykthos activation. We see Elvish Mystic and Voyaging Satyr as the last place for Kent. He's going to pass back. So right now, yeah, to put things in perspective, that turn he upped his Devotion from 7 to 11. So right now the Nykthos, it's basically tapping for 9. So if you look at his mana count, it would be 18, 19, 20. He'd have 24 mana available to him next turn, and that's a minimum because he also can play things before the Nykthos untap.
Yeah. So his single green spells start netting mana, actually. If it's pay a green to cast an Elvish Mystic, that actually generates 2 because the Voyaging Satyr is going to untap the Nykthos.
Yeah, so it's at least 24 mana next turn. All right, and can Tenjum find his own Nykthos? He's going to need that to compete, and he probably needs it this turn. Plays a Courser of Kruphix, 2 draws, and under that, he does see the Nykthos. Can't you see what the reaction knows that he found something good? Tenjum may be able to go off first here because Tenjum actually has the Voyaging Satyr already in play and ready to untap.
Yeah, this felt like the spot where Tenjum needed to find Nykthos right now. And now that he has found it, he may be the one in the driver's seat.
Yeah, so Tenjum has a Devotion of 11 here. So this first tap is going to be for 11. He's going to be able to play some things. We'll see how much damage he can do right now. He's going to have access to at least 20 mana this turn. Like I said, probably more. All right, so he starts by tapping for 11, makes Courser of Kruphix. That's going to draw 2. It draws Nylea's Disciple and a land, so he's down to 8 mana.
Another small but significant improvement for this deck is Llanowar Waste as well, another M15 reprint. The black mana situation it was reasonably consistent, but not ideal. Now the mana base simply gets to be 6 forests, 4 green-black dual lands with Overgrown Tomb and Temple of Malady as well, and the 4 copies of Nykthos.
All right, and here comes the damage. Polukranos puts his mana count down to 4. Voyaging Satyr is going to untap Nykthos. Now his Devotion is up to 15, so that's plus 13. He has a Polukranos and 18 mana live right now.
Yeah.
That big turn that Kent was winding up for, I don't know if it's ever going to come.
Yeah, because once he loses his board here, he then has to be able to reassemble it before he can start doing anything crazy of his own. And in the meantime, he's going to be under a ton of pressure. Tenjum is going to have a large Palakranos on top of just the 1/1s and 2/2s and 2/4s he has scattered about in play.
Look at him, he's counting all the toughness here that Ketter has. So he said 18 mana, so he can activate it. That means for X equals 8, so you have 8 damage to throw around with that Polukranos. Counting here, that's going to be enough to take care of 4 creatures, it looks like, from Ketter.
Well, Palakranos for 8 here, he could do something like Voyaging Satyr, Courser of Kruphix, Eidolon, or Voyaging Satyr, Eidolon, and Burning Tree plus Elvish Mystic. And both of those sort of sequences make it really challenging for Kent to rebuild.
Yeah, it seems like the primary thing is getting that Voyaging Satyr off the table.
It's hard to imagine Kent does anything too bad for you next turn in the absence of that Voyaging Satyr. That has to be priority number 1. After that, if you want to pin down the mana creatures, I would imagine priority 2 is getting rid of the Eidolon, as that's another card that Kent can kind of rebuild with.
And it's going to get rid of everything. So it's targeting all 4 of those creatures. Kent's going to chord in response. I think he's going to chord for Voyaging Satyr, would be my guess. Absolutely, that's the play.
Chord is a really nice piece for this deck.
Yeah, and that was one of the things I was a little interested when I first saw Chord. I thought it was overrated because when people say, hey, Chord's this great staple of Modern, it's going to be great in Standard. And my first thought is, well, in Modern, Chord is really strong because you have plays like, hey, you're playing Storm, I'll Chord for Aethersworn Canonist. You're playing Affinity, well, I'll Chord for this Kataki. And there's nothing that level of backbreaking in Standard. So I was wondering, how good is Chord going to be? But it seems like it's holding its own in decks like this.
Yeah, tutor effects generally get more powerful as the card pool expands. You have more options to search for. So in that respect, Chord is going to be less powerful in Standard than it's going to be in other formats. But Green Devotion is already a reasonable base for to play a competitive standard deck, and so even though you have fewer tutor targets, the power of the format is also lower. So the bar you have to cross for the deck to be reasonable is a lot lower.
All right, so Tenjum, after eating 4 of Kent's creatures, was able to knock down the Garruk with a swing. We'll see, can Kent recover here? Looks like it's gonna take a lot of cards like Burning Tree Emissary to build his Devotion back up. And I don't know how many of them he actually drew off that Garruk. The answer, I don't think he has any Burning Trees, so this is gonna be a rebuilding turn.
Well, Kent has found his 1 copy of Hornet Queen, which is a reasonable defensive measure against the board that the Tenjum's built up here.
Yeah, the worries in me, okay, when you let Andrew untap, he has almost infinite mana.
Yes.
So the question will be like, whether or not Tenjum's hamstrung on card draw. And with a pair of Eidolon Blossoms, my guess is no. My guess is that he'll just be able to continue drawing cards and casting things. If he doesn't have a Garruk already, he may be able to find one. But if he doesn't have a Garruk and doesn't have enchantments for the Eidolon, Kent may be able to rebuild here.
Kent basically has to hope that Answer's hand is lands and mana creatures.
Right.
And he has to play the game assuming that that is the case.
All right, so he starts out playing Sylvan Caryatid, taps Nykthos. This is for a Green Devotion of 5, untaps the with Voyaging Satyr. So right now Nykthos is plus. You can think of it as a land that taps for 3. So 5, that'll go up to 8.
Both players here just confirming that the amount of mana being generated is correct.
That Nylea is on top of the deck, not in play.
Yep.
So yep, it's 5. I always think the way to think about Nykthos, the quick math way, is you count your Devotion, you subtract 2, and then just think about it as a land that taps for that much. Mm-hmm. There's a little asterisk that you need 2 additional mana to start the chain. You can't just have it by itself. But once you do, it's pretty reasonable.
Usually my shortcut, it's kind of the same shortcut when I'm playing online, is once they get to 4 mana symbols in play, I have to pay attention to their Nykthos. That's when it's actually
that just assumes, I like how you just automatically, your story says their Nykthos. It's not,
it's definitely not my Nykthos.
All right, Hornet Queen is down. It's a Flying Death Touch with 4 more Flying Death Touch. That will provide some safe haven for this, 13-13 Pelucranos.
Yeah, Hornet Queen's not shabby here. Tenjum, of course, can blow the whole thing up if he's able to find another copy of Palicranos, but for the time being, I mean, there's no other ways for his deck to kill creatures, so this is a pretty good defensive board from Kent.
Yeah, I was excited to see how Hornet Queen's actually been pretty good in this deck. I've seen talked to some players about the strategy. I think it's one of the more hyped strategies right now, or one of the more, at least flashier ones, using M15 cards. But it's pretty good against grindy decks as well, like these Jund mid-range mono black shell, it's 5 creatures, they probably have to expend multiple cards to kill all this stuff.
Yeah, it seems like a really good game 1 tutor target to go get. You can easily draw too many copies of this kind of card, so I wouldn't want to play beyond the first one, I think, but here it seems excellent. You can imagine all sorts of matchups where this sort of effect is very powerful.
Yeah, and Court of Calling, to be honest, I prefer to never draw this kind of card, and that's why I think Court of Calling is pretty good.
You can see Kent here writing F6 on the back of his life pad. For those of you who are not up on the Moto slang, that's the button you hit to basically say, do whatever you want this turn. I'm not going to stop you or respond or do anything. Just go nuts.
Yeah, you pass priority for the rest of the turn. Say, I have no plays. All right, and Tenjum's going to start with an Nylea's Disciple and gain a ton of life. I wonder how much life total. I don't feel like life totals matter in this matchup.
Feels all about the board. Garruk, Palicranos, those are the runaway cards. And once you develop something overwhelming, the other guys just not catching up. So
yeah, you can swing for 100.
Also, this deck's very good at blocking too, which is another factor. It's hard for the game to come down to damage racing because you have all these Sylvan Caryatid and Corsair Krufix, Hornet Queen type of creatures clogging up the ground.
Yeah, I suppose there's some concern of if you start trading too much, I don't know. I was gonna say you could run out of large creatures, but that doesn't even seem real. I mean, you have such a wealth of mana that you get to do plays as we see from Tenjum here, where he has a 13-13 Pelucranos, and before he even attacks, he's just going to go ahead and make a second one so he can monster set again.
Yeah, it doesn't even matter. Just doesn't need that.
We might even see it fight that this Pelucranos will fight all the Hornets at once.
It better be all of them. You don't want to go halfway.
All right, this one monster says for 12. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. It's exactly 12 toughness, worth of things shot down. And yeah, you know, it seems like the first large Pelucranos activation, it doesn't seem like you come back from it.
It's very tough.
Yeah.
I mean, the upshot is that you have, you know, Sylvan Caryatids, which they can't target, which helps redevelop your mana a little bit, gives you some chump blockers, but so much of your board just gets gunned down anytime this scenario comes up. Very hard to recover.
Now, if you look at Tenjum's board here, however, there's a chance for Ketter. So he's been Plague Winded twice, which, you know, well, that's pretty rough for him. But Tenjum's hand is all lands and mana creatures at this point. And as we said before, you know, that's what Ketter, he needed to play, assuming that if he can stabilize the board. Remember, Tenjum's board now is just a bunch of 2-power guys.
Yeah.
It's like Ketter, if he can get enough Caryatids and Courser of Crucifixes, can actually start to block. So maybe his life total starts to matter a bit here.
He still has a lot of blockers to play with.
And that Pharika, God of Affliction, that's on top of his deck is, I would say, one of the better cards he can get here. If you want to talk about something that makes a lot of blockers at will that can trade away with these creatures, Pharika's going to do a really good job of it.
Although I believe Tenjum has also found his on the top of his deck right now. So.
Oh, all right. So now we get... Tenjum will probably untap and eat the entirety of both graveyards before Ketter ever gets a chance.
Well, I don't think he's going to attack Kent's graveyard necessarily because the trigger on Pharika is symmetrical. Kent gets the tokens if it's out of Kent's graveyard.
Whoever you eat it from gets the token.
Right, but I still think Tenjum gets an opportunity here to make a large Death Touch creature, generate some tokens out of his own graveyard.
Mm-hmm. Now that said, I think Kent's graveyard's much better stocked at this point. Based on, I think he's lost 4 creatures on consecutive turns.
Yeah, and I think Tenjum showing Cord on the top of his deck, Kent's going to give this one up because he knows it's going to be another large Palicranos or something else heinous, and he could barely survive the first 2. The third one is definitely going to kill him.
Thanks to Pharika, Tenjum can draw the Cord this turn, then Cord, get the creature, monster sit, go from there. So game 1 goes to Andrew Tenjum in this green-black Devotion Mirror. Largely, like I said, he was the first person, it seems like, to be able to Voyaging Satyr a Nykthos.
Yeah, that's getting to go first with your Nykthos and having some large payout to me feels like the key of the matchup because there's not a lot in the way of removal spells between these 2 decks, of course. And, you know, you can't really make it a damage race because both decks are so good at blocking and so poor at attacking. So it really comes down to who throws the first Haymaker, and Tenjum was able to do that game 1.
All right, so looking at cards that break the stalemate, I'm going to go ahead and look at the sideboards here. We do have a 75-card mirror. It seems these players, I would assume, working together for this event.
It would be weird if they
didn't.
if they came up with the same 75 independent of one another. That would be weird.
Yeah, but the biggest one I'd say in this matchup that I'm looking to see both players board in is this is a 2 of Setessan Tactics in the board.
Setessan Tactics seems excellent in this matchup. It's another thing to go off with once you have a lot of mana. And these decks all play the same creatures, and so giving your team +1/+1 is going to make things line up so nicely.
Yeah, my Elvish Mystics fight your Elvish Mystics. That seems real good.
Yeah. I also think that 2 copies of Ultimate Price are going to come in as well. You know, just to break up early mana creatures and fight Palicranos, all that kind of stuff. I mean, two copies seem like pretty low cost to bring in and with a lot of upside.
Yeah, so what are you saving your Ultimate Price for? Or, you know, how are you playing it? I agree that I want it in this matchup because I want some way to kill something. This is, you know, I think if you have one when your opponent goes to Monsters of Pelucranos, that's the dream.
I think Palicranos is number 1. I think Eidolon of Blossoms is number 2. And then I think in certain spots, Voyaging Satyr is going to be number 3. But it's hard to go wrong with having that card in your deck. It seems it's going to be productive in any sort of normal game. So I think those are going to come in alongside the Setessan Tactics that you just mentioned.
Yeah, and I think there are some silver bullets in their main deck that they don't particularly need. The first I'm looking at is that Nylea's Disciple does not seem particularly necessary here. And despite the fact that Hornet Queen was good for Kent there, I'm not positive how good Hornet Queen... It seemed like it was all about the Pelucranos that game.
Well, Hornet Queen's one of the better cards. You know, if your opponent's going off with Palicranos, you're going to be in a tough spot to win no matter what. Hornet Queen seems like one of the few cards that does matter in the face of Palicranos. You know, Tenjum had to fight there and loses Palicranos to get the Hornet Queen off the table. If he didn't find a third Cord, or a third Palicranos there, rather, the Hornet Queen might have been able to allow Kent to stabilize the game. So I think that card's probably going to stay in. I don't know if you want to shave some number of the mana creatures out of the deck, because, you know, you need to have a density of the mana creatures because in a lot of matchups they're going to get killed. In the mirror match, that's less the case. You know your creatures are pretty stable, so I don't know if you need all 4 Mystics and all 4 Caryatids and 4 Burning Tree Emissaries and so forth. So I think that's where you're going to see a lot of the sideboarding space come from.
Yeah, well, those guys increase your mana by 1, which is good, which is great and all. But it did seem like in that match, it wasn't about who could get 1 more mana on the other person. It was about who could get 7 more.
Right, and the bodies just don't mean anything because, again, these decks are so well equipped to just block all day long that 2/2 for 2 is it's just not going to do anything. It's predicated on you having Nykthos for that card to be powerful. And you're not really going to struggle to win the games where you have Nykthos plus a board because your creatures aren't being taxed like they are in most matchups.
Is it fair to say that Burning Tree Emissary comes out in almost every matchup with this deck?
I think that you need it against the pretty fast beatdown decks.
Yeah,
you just need a 2/2.
You need to play things.
You know, it helps facilitate early Nykthos draws. It wouldn't surprise me if it was good against mono black as well. But I think in a lot of matchups it probably hits the sideboard.
You know, I know against removal heavy decks you don't like it because they kill your other things and leave you with a 2/2.
Sure, but you also need to get out of the front foot of their removal to some extent too. So
right,
kind of cuts both ways. Like I'd rather have that than a Sylvan Caryatid, for example.
Yeah, and both of them are pretty unexciting in that sort of matchup. He may be. I'm interested in whether we see some of him here. He may be fine when your opponent's not messing with your stuff. Like your best draws start with Burning Tree Emissary, but it may be that there's just so much not messing with your things that, like, finding Nykthos seems like the primary objective here.
I don't know where exactly you're supposed to make cuts because it feels like there's a density of mana creatures / setup here, assuming that stuff will get killed over the course of a game. And in matchups where that's not the case, do you get away from some of that? I suspect you're supposed to, but I do not know for certain.
All right, well, we're underway for game 2. Kent is on the play this time. If you do see, we have numbers next to them. That represents our current standings in the season. Like I said, both top 16 competitors. Kent Ketter currently in 8th, Andrew Tenjum in 16th. These men are chasing Joe Lissette currently as the points leader for Season 3.
Yeah. Ken had a great start to 2014, was dominant in some of the early opens, has a 9th place finish, I believe, in both invitationals so far this year. Tenjum, a lot of his resume was built up in 2013 with his invitational elimination rounds, although I believe he was also in the first invitational this year, and just a regular open series competitor and top 8 competitor.
All right, we'll see what they can do in this match. I was trying to think of other cards that are good in a mirror match here. If this deck picks up popularity, you know, I would be really excited if we saw Hydra Broodmasters in this deck.
I think, oh, you mean if you need tech for the mirror match?
Yeah, that guy seems sweet swinging the mirror.
Yes.
I don't know if you could play him in any other matchup, so maybe. But I mean, right now, if I played him in an untapped with 17 mana, I was like, well, all right, my plan next turn is I'm going to make 7 7/7s.
I think, for me, I think main decks to test and tactics would make the most sense because that's not a hard card to play in this deck regardless. You have so many creatures, so much mana, and you're looking to trade up a good percentage of the time.
That certainly is a much more playable option.
Yeah, I'm trying to color inside the lines a little bit here. I would probably just go with the tactics.
I want to make if I'm going to have to attack with creatures to win, then I want to attack with 50 power worth of them in the same turn. Actually, as far as creature decks go, I could get behind this one, though. It's not really a creature. I don't know.
It plays like a creature deck sometimes, but it also has very explosive combo draws as well.
Right. Yeah. If someone's making 40 mana in a turn, I can respect that. Like, I'm a little disappointed that you're choosing to cast creatures with your 40 mana, but like you made 40 mana, so you still get a pass.
This deck can hypothetically cast something like Guruk plus other stuff on the second turn. So it does have some combo draws too.
Yeah. All right, we're starting out. Kent on the play, Elvish Mystic into Course of Krufix. We do see that he has Nykthos at the ready in his hand. Tenjum, no Elvish Mystic, but he's going to start on Burning Tree Emissary into Voyaging Satyr. So both players with some ramp of their own. I don't know if Tenjum's found the Nykthos yet. That seems real important to me.
And Kent already does have it, so Tenjum might be in trouble very quickly this game.
All right, Elvish Mystic shocks for Overgrown Tomb and just makes Pelukrinos, passes back. And this is actually like a mini combo here, right? Kent can just next turn play Nykthos, do a modest Pelukrinos activation, and eat Andrew's things.
Yes. You don't always have to do it for 12 or whatever for it to be good. You can do it for kind of normal amounts as well.
I would say right away that's the trap I'd fall into if I were playing this deck, because I would be like, I don't want to monsters my Pelucranos for 4. That's way less than 12. You know, even if the 4 won, I would do it, and then I feel real disappointed, and then I probably miss that play next game because I was like, that felt so bad.
Yep.
And right out of the sideboard, as you mentioned there, Ultimate Price takes down Pelucranos on Andrew's side, and it looks like we have another match where fireworks are going to fly, a Nykthos on Tenjum's side. And I think once again, Tenjum's Nykthos is going to be better than Kent's. He has 2 Voyaging Satyrs to go with it.
Yeah, it's unclear if he has any big payoff at this point. I mean, he's down to 2 cards in hand and so forth, but he definitely will have a lot of mana to play with next turn.
Yeah, Kent just makes a forest. We see a second Garruk on top of his deck. He's going to draw some cards. He's setting up for a big turn next turn, so Eidolon of Blossoms draws Garruk. And Elvish Mystic joins the board. And Courser of Kruvix hits in for 2.
Gotta get in your shot when you can.
Boy, these life totals just don't matter.
But you don't want this to be the one game in out of a million where the life total did matter.
So you take your free points.
Gotta take it.
Absolutely. I don't know, he's trading 2 back unless he plans to trade for that Burning Tree Emissary, you know. So let's look at Andrew's mana situation. Right now, Nykthos is tapping for 4. It's +1, so it's a 2. It's a land that taps for 2. But Tenjum could cast something pretty big as early as this turn, especially if he has a Burning Tree Emissary in his hand. Then things could get pretty big.
Yeah. He needs a little bit more setup and then big payouts. That's what he kind of needs from this spot.
Yeah, I think like ideally he'd have Burning Tree Emissary Garruk or something like that in his hand, and then he could really go off to the races.
There's step 1.
All right, Burning Tree Emissary. So now Devotion is at 6, so it's a +3.
Uh-oh.
And it's a Citizen Tactics. So that's another Plague Wind here, as Tenjum's going to Citizen Tactics strive onto 3 of his creatures and knock everything except Courser of Kruvix off the board.
Tough turn for Kent.
It's like Tactics is like more copies of Pelucranos, it seems. You know, it's another green Plague Wind.
Like I said, I would move a couple copies to the main deck if I was worried about the mirror, because that was
real good.
That was really good, and that wasn't even from that big of a base. It's not like Tenjum had 10 creatures in play and Kent had 10 creatures in play. It was, you know, turn 4 of the game, and both players had modest boards, and then that happened.
There's a bunch of Voyaging Satyrs and Burning Tree Emissaries. It's probably better than Hydra Broodmaster would have been.
Most. One could argue.
Hornet Queen joins the board for Tenjum. Now, Tactics doesn't give you the win the game follow-up, I suppose. Like, Pelucranos, not only does he sweep your opponent's board, but then he gives you, like, a 10-10. But Tenjum has a follow-up of his own in Hornet Queen. And a little too much of a good thing here for Ketter. Flips the top card of his deck. That's a 3rd copy of Nykthos. And, all right, he's going to tap for 1, then play Nykthos off the top. And it's going to be Garruk, Caller of Beasts. He's going to have to reload. He's going to have to do it in a big way. Draws Eidolon of Blossoms, Burning Tree Emissary, and Sylvan Caryatid.
Now, we know this Garruk is not long for this world because of the Hornet Queen in play, but Kent just needs to find some cards. He's down so much in terms of raw resources.
Yeah. I mean, he doesn't have another reasonable play. This play, like I said, I don't think this play gets there. It doesn't look like it, but it's a start. His hand is a lot of lands, another Garruk, yet another Nykthos, and then that Eidolon and Caryatid he drew. All right, the insects fly over, knock down Garruk. But there is some hope here, right? Other side of that Hornet Queen, Tenjum just played his last card, and it's all mana dorks.
Now, if Ken is able to find his own Hornet Queen or Apollo Chronos or a Cord, then the only thing really threatening him right now is the Hornet Queen. He's got a lot of time.
Yeah, that's 6 damage per turn. Right now it's 4 turns. That's more than enough time for Kent.
Yeah.
So actually, yeah, this is an interesting part. Like, this deck does run out of fuel sometimes. Based on, it has this ramp problem that's like inherent in ramp strategies where it's a 3-piece puzzle, right? You need your enablers, your lands, and your haymakers. Nykthos trick again.
Yeah, I've definitely seen this deck, play a bunch of stuff, do something impressive, get hit with a Supreme Verdict and then just have nothing to follow up with and sort of just peter out.
Yeah, and the Courser Eidolon interaction, it's been interesting to see the deck develop, right? Courser Eidolon has helped that problem a lot. I think Cord helps the problem even more, but it's still there.
Yeah.
We'll see. He's going to draw that Burning Tree Emissary, cast another Eidolon, and he's found his own Hornet Queen plus an ultimate price. I'm going to go and say that this seems... Kent has... I think he's recovered here, maybe even more, has done more than recover.
Yeah, this needs to... I feel like this needs to be Palacrano's stat from Tenjum.
Yeah, because Kent has the card draw right now. You know, he has this double Eidolon, he has a Garruk. If this game goes on, Kent is going to spend all of this mana every turn, and I don't think Tenjum's going to.
Yeah.
Carried not going to help. That was the drop for Tenjum. So this is going to be Kent's off to the races turn. And if he gets another turn, that's going to be his, like, dominate the board style turn.
Yeah.
So if Tenjum can draw something like a Cord or something next turn, he passes the F6 over to Tenjum. And hits the button. All right. I like it. I have to tell you, I don't use F6 anymore. When I first started playing Moto, I hit F6 a bunch whenever my turn was over, and then I like to hit buttons really fast when I play computer games. It's like this ingrained thing of playing video games since I was, you know, my whole life, and so now it's like, I've F6'd through too many things to use F6.
Yeah, I'm not a big F6 fan because I don't mind it if you're like tapped out, no blockers, but
Sure.
Otherwise F6ing means your opponent can tell that you have F6, so you no longer have to play around, you know, 1 mana removal spells when your opponent has 1 mana up and they've F6, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Moto hacks, if you don't know this one, my favorite one is F8, if you know that one for Moto.
I do not.
Okay, so what this one does is if at any point you are tapped out with no, you know, you have no plays, you're tapped, like your mana's tapped and you have no creatures with activated abilities, then it F6s you until that's no longer the case.
Oh, that sounds like a good button.
Yeah. It's a little disconcerting the first time you use it because say you attack and then you tap out, it'll just immediately start going through phases. So sometimes you'll end up clicking through things you don't want to. But if you play like 3 or 4 games with it, then you're good. And I don't know, that one's really helped. It also means that sometimes I get annoyed because if you have a card like Slaughter Pact in your hand, then you can't F6 ever again. F8 just stops working. It's like, whoa, at any point you may want to kill something. So then you have to manually do it. But
Sure.
Cards that ruin the F8. But the card, that's a useful function. I can do that one. All right, so let's go back to our game, though. Kent here has established the pieces. So what is his devotion right now at 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11, 12 off Nykthos. We see Cetessan Tactics on top of the board for him. I don't know if he has a way to draw it. Does not look like it.
No, he just had a Hornet Queen he was able to deploy. Just a Hornet Queen.
Just a Hornet Queen, Garruk, and Ultimate Price are available. This is interesting. So if you play Garruk and plus it, you're going to lose that Tactics draw next turn. And Garruk's a really good. Like, I don't know. Do you want to plus Garruk on this board? I almost feel like the answer is no. You'd rather have Tactics. But Tactics doesn't really take care of. Like, you have Hornet Queen to take care of Hornet Queen, and Tactics to take care of everything else. Do you need that Garruk?
Yeah, it doesn't feel like Tactics is the best thing to be able to find on this board. I would probably just cast the Garruk, but you can also understand keeping the Tactics.
Yeah, between the Tactics and Hornet Queen in hand, he should have Tenjum covered. But of course, Tenjum can always draw. You know, when Tenjum finds that live draw, it's going to be real live.
Yeah.
And we'll see what he hits this turn. We do. Keeps it face down, so we don't know yet. Whatever it is, he'll have enough mana to do it instantly, and for whatever full value that card brings.
There is almost no card in Magic that's green that he cannot cast right now, so whatever the big thing he is that he's able to find, he's going to be able to go crazy.
Now you got me thinking if there's some card that you can't cast for some weird reason. But now I think you can cast all the green Magic cards.
I mean, I'm sure there's some weirdos hanging out, but
There's got to be something that like says destroy target, like can only target a black something or something really weird. And his draw was Farika, God of Affliction. That seems decent. I'd take that.
it's not shabby. It's one of his better draws.
There's still a problem that Farika's not, it's not a haymaker. And right now, Kent has haymakers and Tenjum does not.
And Kent may be able to just take Tenjum off of Devotion, in fact, because he has so much removal at this point with his tactics, and if he's able to find a Palikronos and so forth.
Yeah, I don't know how much he even needs the Palikronos. If he can sweep Tenjum's board, which I think he's very close to doing, I mean, he can't sweep the Caryatids, but I think he can sweep the other mana creatures, it takes away Tenjum's draws, because now drawing something like a Palikronos isn't game-ending.
Yep.
And here we go, starting with Garruk Collar Beast. It's always good when that's your, that's how they start the turn. It's not always ending it. Draws Sylvan Caryatid, Palikronos, and nothing else, but that's gonna be good enough.
Yeah, and keep in mind there's still, I believe, 7 mana floating right now.
Yeah, what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. 7 mana floating. Nykthos now taps for more mana in addition. So yeah, 3 mana floating, 1 mana floating. And now the Nykthos doesn't tap for 13. He added 5, so it taps for 18. So it's a plus 16. So there's 7. He can activate Palikronos for X equals 8 right now.
Which is a really nice spread, actually, because it allows him to kill both Burning Tree Emissaries and both Voyaging Satyrs.
Yeah, 8's kind of the ideal. 8's a very good number here.
Yeah. And then, as you mentioned before, that just takes the, cuts the legs out of so many of Andrew's hypothetical power draws in this spot, because he just has no board to work with once this happens.
And we see that play using that last mana and the 1 floating mana to activate Nykthos again off the Voyaging Satyr. He can actually, no, he can do it for 9 thanks to those 2 mana creatures. He could have an additional point. I don't know if he needs it, but.
There's not even really anywhere for it to go. Tenjum's board is either a Death Touch indestructible creature or hexproof or tiny creatures, so.
Yeah. 8 down for Palikronos. He eats away all the enablers. Tenjum doesn't even want to. Last game, Kent played around a couple turns before scooping. I think with 13 minutes on the clock, Tenjum makes the right choice here and shuffles up for game 3.
This is kind of a fun mirror match because both decks just get to do their thing. And,
right, you get to see real broken things happen.
It's really rare, you're playing against control decks and you have to play against all these sweepers and you're playing against beatdown decks and your mana creatures are getting shocked or whatever, or you're playing against Mono Black Devotion, you're getting hit with Thoughtseize and removal spells. Here it's just go have fun. Go,
right.
go
to
do
town. Just
do whatever you want.
What's the biggest thing you could do? What can you do? Right. So it really, I still feel like it's a race to who can monsters Palikronos for 5 or something first.
Based on the first 2 games, it feels like that's the thing that matters the most.
Remember, Ketter got tactics, Tenjum cast a pretty nice Setessan Tactics early on in that game too. What was it? I think it was a 3 for 0 and took all of Kent, everything but the Corso Crucifix off the board for Kent.
Yep, but those little exchanges don't feel like they're that significant because it's not like you can follow up that kind of turn by starting to attack, because it's very easy for Kent to rebuild a board that's good at blocking. You still need to follow it up with one of your power cards at some point to really close the game, and Tenjum never really found one. He did find Hornet Queen, but that's a slow clock. Kent was able to find his own, and Andrew was just left with very little power left over in his hand.
Well, I would go so far as to say that in this matchup, Hornet Queen is not a power card. As strange as that sounds, it's a card that, does a lot of things.
Well, it's 6 power and it's evasive, and so
yeah,
it's obviously not Palikronos or Garruk or anything, but it's a card that could hypothetically kill the other player as opposed to the Burning Tree Emissaries and Corso Crucifixes.
Sure, yeah, it's not an enabler, you're right. Yeah. It was we saw there, his game ender was Hornet Queen, and it just didn't end the game. It didn't do it. He didn't let him snowball, and that it wouldn't be like you said. A Garruk there would have done the same thing. Would have been much better.
If Kent's hand was really bad, maybe it would have mattered, but that it was Hornet Queen instead of something else. But it is definitely comfortably a tier below the real power in the matchup, which is Palikronos, Court of Calling, and Garruk.
Hydra Broodmaster. Still would have been really, that'd be another power card. Sorry, I'm going to get off that one, but I want to see someone.
You're not wrong.
It would be real
powerful.
good.
It would have been really good.
Look at all. It's even efficiently costed, right? It's a 7/7 for 6. That's above the curve. More power than mana cost. Yeah. We could.
we got a pretty good crew that came out for this tournament today, which is exciting. Joe Lissette flew out from California. Kind of a last-minute decision here. He's in the house. Ken Ketter, Tenjum, you're seeing them on camera. Jeff Hugel, Jesse Hefner, who was a runner-up in the first Invitational this year. Matthew Hoey, Phelan Longmore, and Peter Tragos. Jeff Rasmussen, Adam Boyd, and Grant Wilkinson, and Noah Cohen. So, good squad. A lot of people came out for this one, and I think we're going to start seeing more and more of that as we get further into Season 3 and into Season 4. A lot more traveling. Try to lock up those 8 slots.
Yeah, so those are the players I think in the race, you said here. Yeah, Lissette, Ketter, Tenjum, Hoagland, and Hefner who've shown up here. All right, Game 3, though, underway. Elvish Mystic starting for Tenjum. Building up here. Ketter has a hand, it looks like, with a pair of Voyaging Satyrs. No Nykthos, but does have a Garruk, and so he has enough to ramp up to. We'll see what kind of time Tenjum's going to give him. And that is an aggressive play. All right, turn 2, Tenjum plays Burning Emissary, makes 2 mana, and then immediately chords. So this is a chord for 3.
Yeah.
And it's going to be for...
chord for 1. 2 floating.
Oh, right, it's chord for 1, right, because the mana were tapped. Okay, yeah, it's a chord for 1, just another Elvish Mystic. If he has a Nykthos, he could make Garruk next turn.
I mean, he's got to have some super explosive play for this turn if he was willing to fire off a chord like that.
Yeah. Well, Voyaging Satyr was just a play for Ketter.
And Tenjum's untapping so fast here. I mean, he's already got an idea what he wants to be doing here.
Swings for 2, and I wonder whether that is what he has. See a land there, a Sylvan Caryatid. His last card is Garruk, so it's not a turn 3 Garruk, but it's going to be a turn 4 Garruk.
I think Kent can comfortably assume that's what's going on here too. Again, if Andrew is willing to fire off that chord like that.
I have another mirror match card, and here's a reasonable one. What about, I've never seen anyone board Thoughtseize in this matchup, in this deck, but it doesn't seem totally unreasonable.
That seems fine.
Like, what if Kent, like, I was just thinking right here, if Kent Thoughtseize Tenjum on this turn, like, how good would that be?
It's hard to go too wrong with having Thoughtseizes.
That's true. All right. But Tenjum gets his turn 4 Garruk, flips it. It is going to be a Polukranos and nothing else. 2 Nykthoses and a chord all go to the bottom. Pretty underwhelming Garruk there. He did draw Eidolon of Blossoms for the turn as well, though.
And Kent has just drawn Nykthos of his own here, so.
Yeah, looks like Kent's behind on board, but he does have the same cards as Tenjum has, plus a Nykthos. This will be interesting because I think both players are going to have uncontested Garruks for a bit, so the turns are going to get really big very quickly.
To me, the big question is, you see Kent, he has his Assassin Tactics in his hand. Does he want to try to fight over Garruk at all? Or does he just say, I can fight through this Garruk, I'm going to build up the board?
Looks like he's going to go for the latter there. He uses Tactics to sweep all three of Tenjum's mana creatures off the board, leaving him with just a Caryatid and a Garruk. So, Garruk pluses. I think if it hadn't plus, there was a chance he was going to minus and put Polukranos in play and eat things. But now he just needs more weapons, and he pluses it and finds Pharika, Burning Emissary, and another Polukranos.
And pinning down Tenjum's mana is another way to take a lot of the power out of Garruk, because Andrew just can't efficiently deploy the cards he's finding.
Yeah, this is one of the few decks that, like, playing all the cards that Garruk finds you, like, it's very hard to play the cards as fast as Garruk draws them, and without a Nykthos.
Or at least a lot of mana creatures. I mean, that could even do it too in certain spots.
All right, Polukranos is the play for Tenjum. He has no lands this turn. And yeah, Ketter has successfully choked him on mana sources at the moment. He still needs to be aware, I would think, though, of not letting Tenjum get a Garruk emblem.
Sure.
Because that's a way to bypass, that's a way to, quote unquote, generate mana, casting creatures without having to pay for them. And he starts with Eidolon of Blossoms. Yeah, so that's actually, if you look at Garruk there on the left, then -7, giving you an emblem. Ketter has to be acutely aware of this one right now. Because he doesn't have a board where he can probably profitably attack Tenjum. And if Tenjum gets that emblem, I do think that he can keep pace with Ketter.
Yeah. Well, now Kent has his own Palikronos, which means that Tenjum needs to kill it or generate a lot of mana this turn and go off, or else Kent's going to be able to pretty easily deal with this board.
Yeah, he could use an ultimate price. He found one off the Garrick, but if you can't take it, he actually found no cards to draw off that Garrick. It went up to 7. Cord, ultimate price, second copy of Garrick, all to the bottom.
Now, does Tenjum have anything of note to follow up with here, you know? Needs to be Nykthos or something big, because Kent's about to really do some damage next turn.
He has a pair of Voyaging Satyrs and a Nykthos. The Nykthos is currently tapping for 7. This is a huge amount of mana on Ketter's side of the board, and Tenjum knows it. He plays some guys and passes, but this Palikronos is gonna eat the world, as is his name. So what do we have here? Yeah, it's 7. So we have at least 7, 14, 21, 2, 3, 4, 25 mana here.
Tenjum's losing his board is the short summary of what's going on this turn.
Yeah, everything's getting eaten. Well, I'm wondering whether or not he's losing his life total as well. The Sylvan Caryatid's tapped. I think Ketter can kill him this turn. So he already has at least 25 mana.
Well, Tenjum has a Caryatid back, so he at least has a chump blocker.
Oh, okay. There's another Caryatid. All right, he has a chump blocker. You're right. There's another Caryatid back.
Yeah.
So
this is still really bad for Tenjum.
yeah.
No ifs, ands, or buts about it, but I think he doesn't die this turn.
Well, the hard thing is that Ketter can attack with Eidolon as well as Palikronos to knock the Garrick down to 5. And once Tenjum loses the possibility of a Garrick emblem, I don't see where his out is. I don't see where he's going.
Well, if he's able to find a removal spell for Palikronos, then maybe he can kind of like rebuild.
Sure, yeah, if
He's
Ketter
not
has
under-
nothing.
Yeah, he's not under any pressure to do anything. You know, it's just the Palikronos that's threatening Tenjum's life total, so.
Yeah, ideally he would get that emblem from Garrick and find Hornet Queen to deal with this, I think. But yeah, it doesn't seem like he's gonna get that option. Garrick, Palikronos monstrous for 9, eats everything but the Caryatid. And looks like all 3 creatures are going to attack. He can go Palikronos at Tenjum and then both piddling creatures at Garrick.
Yeah. Or he can send Palikronos at Garrick along with, and his 2 creatures at Tenjum also. And basically force Tenjum to decide to lose Garrick or his creature for sure.
Well, I think Tenjum would just pick to lose. I think he wants to get that Garrick off 7 counters. That would be my, giving Tenjum that emblem, it seems to me that's giving Tenjum an out.
Yeah.
Yep, and he's gonna go the 2 little guys at Garrick, the Palikronos at Tenjum. So Garrick won't get to ultimate this turn.
But this is a non-lethal attack, so Tenjum could just say, I'll take it from Palikronos and throw a block on one of Kent's creatures that are going after Garrick.
That's exactly what he's gonna do. So he takes 14, drops to 4, Garrick goes down to 6. He's gonna have to draw a Hornet Queen and minus it into play, I would think. But he doesn't have it. He could draw it. He's gonna go ahead and plus Garrick. Does he find Hornet Queen? He finds Voyaging Satyr, nothing else. And I mean, he can make jump blockers for a while, I guess, unless Kent has another Palikronos or something like that. Tenjum has time. I mean, there's a slight problem that he's at 4, but
Yeah, he just might get attacked to death this turn.
Yeah, he made Farika that turn. Kent's gonna go ahead and shows a Court of Calling, and that will go ahead and do it. Kent Ketter, 2-1 defeats Andrew Tenjum in round 1 here in Kansas City.
A lot of fun. That matchup is pretty sweet. Again, both players just kind of get to do their thing. So Kent there with slightly more explosive draws in 2 of the 3 games, and that's what's going to come down to in this matchup.